We are live, and I'm Gustavo Tolosa, and hosting our weekly webinars, the Live with Dr. McDougall. We usually have Dr. McDougall on Thursdays, and on the second Thursday of each month, we have our very special guest, Dr. Doug Lisle, who is a psychologist for the McDougall program, and he also works at True North. And it's always a pleasure and a true privilege. I hope that, Dr. Lisle, that I mean it from my heart, and that we all here really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's cool.
Thank you. So today, Dr. Lisle, welcome. I'm going to put you here on the side, and then I will kind of disappear magically and let you answer questions. Thank you, everyone, for logging in. Hi from Paris. Oh, bonjour. Comment allez-vous? I am studying French. Okay, so Dr. Lisle, the plan for today is to have people ask questions live. We also have a few questions that people have submitted ahead of time. Would you like to do any kind of introduction or anything?
No, let's just jump in.
Jump in. All right, very good. So here is a question for you. It's a little bit long, but I think we need the explanation. And this is someone that says, I hear people talking about sticking to a low-fat, whole food, plant-based diet long-term. And I often hear them say that it would be boring and that they would miss their favorite treats if they could never have them again. When I think of boring, I think of sitting through 8 hours of traffic school, not eating all the potatoes, rice, and beans I desire. If they truly find this delicious way of eating boring, isn't it because their life is boring and they're looking for their food for excitement? Or is there something physiological going on when people only eat foods that produce less dopamine in the brain?
Let's see. Sort of long, complicated question. So let's talk about a few things. First of all, there's individual differences in what we're going to call openness to experience, and so this is a personality variable. And this it isn't just like how far you want to travel or how exotic your vacations are. It's also has to do with how wide the palate is for all sensory stimulation. So people that are very open to experience want to taste a wider variety of foods than people that are less open to experience. So that's why in my video, The Perfect Personality, I talk about my friend, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, as being the perfect personality. He's not very open to experience, to say the least. And so as a result, he is very content to keep his food experiences very narrow. So part of the problem is that people that are naturally very open, even if they eat this diet and there's quite a wide variety in the diet, they can start to feel that rebelliousness and frustration that they are not experiencing everything that there is to experience. So that is one problem here, and the solution to that problem is that those people actually have more work to put in order to develop a wider repertoire of putting exotic, healthy foods together. So their task can be quite a bit more difficult just in getting that organized. Whereas with someone like Alan, he said he could eat broccoli and brown rice, 3 times a day for his whole life, he'd be fine. It's just outrageous. I mean, but for me, I'm not that far behind. I could do a very simple diet that is repetitive, and it doesn't bother me. Whereas I know many people that are just naturally so adventurous that would be frustrating for them. So if you're one of those people that one of the things that you've experienced is boredom on this diet, that is not something that I've ever experienced on this diet, incidentally. And so if that has happened to you or that happens often, then that just tells you and you've done the diet well enough that your palate is well acclimated. In other words, it's not that the food tastes bad, it's just not exciting and interesting. That's telling us that you are naturally open, and therefore you have to do more work you have to break open cookbooks, even if that's not your thing. And you have to experiment and get more knowledgeable about how to put together some novel things for you so that you don't get bored.
Thank you for saying that, Will, because that's exactly, I didn't know that someone was going to turn in this question. That's exactly what I was thinking this week. I can also eat a pretty, simple diet, but I am one of those that a couple of times a month, I have to open my cookbook and find something new and
Yes.
adventurous. Because then, if not, the thoughts of eating something bad, they start coming in my
Yes.
mind. So I guess I'm one. Thank you.
Yeah.
That really helped.
I know you enough to know that you are probably more open than average, just in general. If we looked at you
Yeah.
on a bell curve, and so I can tell the difference in these people. Dr. McDougall is probably down the middle.
Right.
And it's been useful for him because Mary is very domestic in terms of her love of the kitchen. And so as a result, she's been experimenting for, all this time and puts together all kinds of interesting things. So even though they eat pretty simple, there's always enough novelty there that he's never getting bored. But for yourself and people like you, more effort needs to be put in. You have to have a repertoire of 25 things rather than a repertoire of 6 or 8. And that difference takes some doing.
And I think it is important for all of us here to know that we're all different. So we can all stick to this way of eating, but we all need our own variations and learning ourselves. It's kind of fun, actually, to
Yes.
learn about yourself.
Spoken like an open person. Yeah.
It is. You just find out things. I just actually realized that this week that I thought is there something wrong with me? Why am I starting to think about these things that I shouldn't be
Yes.
eating? It's just because for 3 weeks, I had been eating just the same thing over and over.
Yes.
So I went to the store, I bought something. It's not anything really new, but I did make a couple of new recipes and I'm happy.
There you go. Very good.
Anyway, all right. So we have another question here, and I will probably turn off the camera for a minute so that I can read the question properly. This email says, I would love to know if childhood trauma has nothing to do with eating disorders, processed food addiction, and weight issues, regardless of person's actual weight or shape. Why do so many of us have that connection? Why are women that have been sexually abused and tend to suffer with these issues more than people that have not? And then this person says that she has read or is reading your book and is The Pleasure Trap, and that she understands that if I was abused and the only food available was plants, then this may not be an issue. I realize that plenty of Africans, Chinese, Japanese males and females have endured sexual trauma and have remained slim because of environment and culture. Yet, it's still challenging for me to understand.
Right. Very good question. This is a widespread and deep misunderstanding about the nature of motivation. The people are not trying to fix pains from the past by eating junk in the present. It's not how you're wired up. So when you have traumatic events of any kind, what happens is that you will remember those in contexts where they could be threatening vital interests in the present. So that's how the brain's designed. The brain is not designed in a sort of neo-Freudian way that if you got injuries and hurts in the past, that somehow the brain is working on those and it's hurting and it's been compromised. That's not how it works. So this comes from the psychoanalytic tradition, these ideas. And there's many reasons why they hang around, primarily because the truth has been fairly recent in our understanding. In other words, so there are very few psychologists that actually understand how the mind works. And it'll be 100 years before the truth about the architecture of human motivation is actually well understood and taught in all the textbooks and then becomes part of our popular culture. So it probably will take that long. So we have people now deeply confused because they're confused about why it is that they do what is seemingly self-destructive. So they learn that they should eat less, exercise more. I'm not talking about a McDougall educated person. I'm talking about the average person. So the average person that is 40 or 50 pounds overweight, which is typical for an American woman. Average American woman is about 40 pounds overweight by her 36th birthday. And so that person is deeply puzzled and is deeply frustrated and doesn't understand why this is happening. And they're making efforts, repetitive efforts, to try to stop it. So they try to eat less. They try to push themselves away from the table. They try to get themselves to the gym. It all kind of falls apart and nothing ever really happens. And if they ever start to investigate why, they're puzzled and they're embarrassed. So there's two different processes going here, both puzzlement and the frustration that goes along with not being able to execute on what would seem to be a reasonable plan. And a McDougall would have even a deeper understanding that it's the food choices that I need to make, and I need to make those intelligently, and I need to get some moderate exercise, etc. And so the person is puzzled about why they're not doing this. They are frustrated about why they're not doing it. And finally, they're embarrassed. And so this puts together a triumvirate of confusion and motivation that makes them highly susceptible to psychodynamic explanations for why this is going on. So it is a beautiful thing if we are failing at something that seems like it's important, it seems like we should be motivated, and we are motivated, and we are embarrassed because we're not executing on something reasonable. It's an extremely useful device to find somebody to blame for it. And so people do. So people blame people for all kinds of things, and and sometimes, like I said, there's legitimate confusion. So the answer to the question is that no, childhood sexual abuse and or any other kind of abuse doesn't have anything to do with your food choices today. It's not related to it. And the angst and upsettedness of a person's present life at 35 years old doesn't really have anything to do with their childhood. We know this. We've got great research that documents this in excruciating detail. And so the pains and bumps and bruises of today are being caused by our adaptive challenges today in work, love, and human relationships. And those relationships are always under competitive pressure, and there are stressors naturally involved in these things. And so, God forbid, a person is in the pleasure trap, which essentially is 99% of humanity, and that they are struggling with, for example, something as obvious and handicapping as excess weight, which is almost everybody. And so we now have a situation where knowledgeable people who are making significant efforts to try to weave their way outside of this are deeply frustrated. They are puzzled at their own inability to do this, and they are embarrassed. And those three things give rise to a very fertile mental ground for finding an excuse. And when I say an excuse, trust me, I'm not shaming anybody for latching onto this excuse. I believe that it's motivated partly by curiosity, partly by a desperate need to understand, to try to get to the root of it, and also by embarrassment. So this explanation winds up being very palatable for people, pardon the pun, but it's very palatable, and it's incorrect. So the real issue here, folks, and the reason why I try to repeatedly make this issue as clear as I can. I wrote a 240-page book on this problem. And what I was trying to get across, as you'll see if you read it, is that the problem is the pleasure trap. And the pleasure trap is a hidden force. That's right on the title of the book. It's the hidden force. You don't see it. What's happening here is that the pleasure trap is the activation of human instinct. And human instinct is the most powerful motivating force that there is. Instincts can be overridden, but with great difficulty. And so as a result of this, the pleasure trap is easily the dominant force in the person's problem. And I go through this. And so pleasure seeking, pain avoidance, and energy conservation mechanisms are all working to conspire to essentially give the individual the advice that every ancestor would have given them from the beginning of time about what food choices they should make. And that advice is eat the richest food in the environment. 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 That is the advice. Okay? So it is no surprise at all, and to me, no shame when an individual can't do it. Okay? So just learning about the pleasure trap will not defeat it. It is step one. Then we have many other steps to it. This requires a diligent Buddhist-like practice of being determined that we're going to plan our meals. We're not going to have any junk food in the house. We're going to know where we're aiming our behavior, and we're going to do it over and over again with great diligence. As you do this, you will start to get several benefits, one of which will be a less adulterated palate, so that healthy food will not have quite the same deficit in juxtaposition to rich food. So healthy food will taste pretty good. And as Dr. Alan Goldhammer likes to say, True North Health Kitchen, where good food tastes not bad. Okay? So you're fighting an instinct where the good food tastes not bad versus the bad food tastes really good. And to do that consistently and to do it very well to the point where you maintain a healthy palate is not something that very many people are going to do. And so this questioner is, echoing a question that I have heard more than 1,000 times. And I was hearing it before I ever started writing that book, which is why I wrote it. I wrote that book as a guidepost to consumers and psychologists to explain that the previous understanding of why it is that we would have self-destructive behavior is mistaken. The self-destructive behavior is much more straightforward, much clearer. It doesn't make it easier. So if the reason why I'm also vehement on this point is because if you get this wrong, if you are seduced by the notion, which believe me, it's very seductive, like something bad happened to me, that's why I'm having trouble with this, and it wasn't fair what happened to me, and so therefore I'm actually a better and stronger and more conscientious and more diligent person than you're seeing, but I had something bad happen to me. So, I can't jump over the high jump because I have a trick knee. Okay, I can't jump over this bar that seems so reasonable and so valuable, and that seems like I should do it because I have a trick knee, because of my psychology in the past I was damaged by somebody. Okay, that is very palatable and very reasonable. It just doesn't happen to be true. Okay, so the reason why I'm vehement about this is that people will continue to fail, and they will continue to struggle and be mesmerized by this very seductive explanation. If they don't get it straight, they're never going to get it right. Okay, so read the book again, listen to my lectures again, and listen to what I'm doing as I'm talking to you right from the core of biology and from your natural history. The reason you have this problem is because the problem is very hard. It is very hard. Okay. And as this person writes, it would trap anybody. It will trap them anywhere in the world. Okay. No matter what their stressors are, all we have to do is enter this supernormal stimuli for food or drugs, and we're going to get the problem. So drug addiction is not caused by problems that took place in people's past. Drug addiction is caused by the fact that drugs are extremely attractive and they hyperactivate the dopamine or endorphin pathways in the brain, and certain people are genetically susceptible more than others. That is why the problem exists. Virtually everybody is highly genetically susceptible to the pleasure trap with respect to food, and that's why almost everybody is in the trap, whether they've had beautiful childhoods and never had an emotional bruise or not. They're facing the same problem, and it is just as difficult for those people as it is for anybody else.
Lyle, so there is something to say about genetics.
Oh, yes. There's considerable individual differences in genetics. This is why Alan didn't have any problem getting out of the pleasure trap.
Right.
You know, he was out of the trap within a couple of weeks. I actually remember it. This took place when we were about 17 years old. And so Alan took this on, and within it was about 2 weeks. About the end of the first week, he was telling me he struggled for about a week, and then he was done.
Right.
Can you believe that? That's 40 years ago. This was a minor annoyance for this guy for a week, and we were done. That's individual differences. And now, of course, I had no idea what I was looking at for many years, but now we know what we're looking at. We're looking at a bland palate that is also very narrow inside of a highly conscientious, intelligent individual. That's an unusual combination of factors that led to easy success with this problem, and to his forever puzzlement as to why the rest of us are such a bunch of flakes.
Right. Well, I just find it fascinating because you mentioned drugs, for example. Well, drugs is something that I have never appealed to me in the least. Right. But then I see a family that I know where they have two children. Well, they're older now, and they grew up in the same house under the same rules and the same education, and one has problems with drugs and the other doesn't. So,
right. Individual
that's right. And we have to get to the point, I guess, where we all have to accept that we have genetics to deal with.
We have genetics, and we also, once again, we have to accept truth number one of this process is to understand that it is very hard. If you understand that it is very hard, and that we understand that it is very hard, then there's no embarrassment over the fact that you keep stumbling and bumping your knees. And therefore, we don't have to start reaching for bizarre psychodynamic explanations as to why it's difficult. Right. No, it's difficult because it's difficult.
It is difficult
because you're going against the primal instincts of humanity. And so that is why this is very hard. Expect it to be hard. Expect to have to fight, and expect to have to be absolutely determined and to use every trick that we've come up with to try to make it easier. That's what you have to do. And don't be going to a shrink or a counselor and trying to work this out that one day we're going to get rid of some past hurt and then you won't have the problem. That is ludicrous. Okay, we spring this trap on any species anytime we want. It doesn't matter whether it's a cricket or a bee or a water buffalo. All we have to do is process the food, and they instantly, overwhelmingly prefer the food.
Yeah,
that is, you basically can't get them out of it. So why would we expect it any different from a human? So a human can do it, but if they have to be smart, and they have to be diligent, and they have to fail 100 times. And if you do that, you pay your prices, you'll get there.
Yeah. Thank you. That's for such a brilliant explanation, Dr. Lisle. Just going to say, you're amazing.
It's been said it 1,000 times. That's why it comes out.
Well, it's still brilliant.
Okay.
So, Dr. Lisle, maybe a question now that is a little bit different. Someone here is asking, losing inches but not weight, calorie density issue or salt retention?
Interesting. I don't know because I'm not there and I'm not measuring what the person is doing, and et cetera, et cetera. So in principle, I suppose a person could be losing inches, but not weight. Probably not. In other words, what's probably happening is that there's sort of quite a bit of variation in your weight that takes place. How much fluid you have, how much undigested fiber and materials sitting in your colon. Hormonal issues will influence this from time to time. How much glycogen you have stored in your liver and your muscles, etc. So there's considerable variation from day to day, and people can go in little streaks where for several days they'll be down a few pounds, but they really haven't lost any fat. So I'm not really sure about commenting on this because the record keeping is always a little suspicious. Not to say that the person isn't being honest, but the point is they're not necessarily understanding all the variables that they're looking at. This is why the way that I tell people to do things, the way I tell people to do things is to measure themselves, for example, 3 times in a row at the beginning of a month, or any time, but could be 3 times in a row at the beginning of the month, under the same kind of conditions, say 3 mornings in a row, and take the average. And then we're not going to really be concerned about that scale for another month. So a month later, we're going to do the same thing. Three days in a row, take the average. Now, if you are overweight and you have not lost any weight on average in the last month, then that's a problem. And that tells us that we've still got too high of calorie density in the diet, in all probability, and that we need to, pare away at something that is a little too rich and then move on from there. If you've lost 1 pound, that's not bad. And so it's not necessarily what we were looking for, but we would definitely do another month before we would change anything up, because you may be on the right track and it's okay. It depends upon how large you are and how much we're looking to lose, etc. If you're quite substantially overweight and you only lose 1 pound, then we're going to look again at the calorie density, and we're going to try to make a few changes, trade out some of the food, some lower calorie dense food, for some of the higher calorie dense food that you're eating. If you've lost 2 pounds, I'm not even remotely concerned. You need to stay exactly with the program. 2 pounds of fat in a month is very substantial, folks. It's 8,000 calories over 30 days, which means it's more or less 250 calories a day is being cannibalized off your fat tissue. This is outstanding. And people need to understand that when they are going from, people a lot of times will lose a dramatic amount of weight. When they go from a really lousy diet to a pretty good diet, they might lose 10 pounds in a month. But you have to understand those people were coming from a horrendous diet to a good diet, or a pretty good diet. Whereas when we have people that are going from a good diet to a good diet, in other words, they pretty much don't change what they're eating, they're on a plan like this, then you can generally expect that the change is not going to be that dramatic. And if you are overweight, we should see a modest reduction from month to month. And it might not be more than a couple of pounds. If you're 30 pounds overweight, it might be 2 pounds a month. If you're 50 or 60 pounds overweight, I would expect more. In other words, I would expect the body to be shedding 3 or 4 pounds a month. That wouldn't be unusual. So people a lot of times have an unrealistic understanding about how fast this process moves. That gets them frustrated. It gets them looking for things like inches as opposed to weight, and whether something as good is happening that I'm not seeing, and they're tapping their foot. Let's look at the data a little more carefully. Let's look at it on a month-to-month type of a basis. And we do a good job for a month, and then we look at the score sheet and we see what happened. And as long as we're moving in the right direction, there's no reason to change the program.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So someone is asking about, can you address satiety? What if you cannot feel satiated without overeating?
People can feel satiated without overeating, and they do. So sometimes people don't know what overeating means. So, for example, 2,000 calories is a lot of food. And if you're eating food that's 400 to 500 calories a pound, you're eating large amounts of food. And so in order for you to be satiated, you may eat what you would consider to be overeating. So when you look at Alan Goldhammer eat or John McDougall eat, they're eating very large amounts of food. And somebody that didn't understand this would say, wow, that seems like they're overeating. They're not overeating. You can eat a tremendous amount of vegetables and be getting very few calories. So I want you to think about this, that in principle, let's suppose if you're eating 3 times a day and you're eating about 700 calories a meal, that would be pretty typical for a typical woman in the United States. Has a calorie budget of about 1,900 calories a day. So if you're eating more or less somewhere in that range, let's suppose you're eating 500 or 600 calories in a meal. 600 would be typical. So if you're eating 600 calories at that meal, Let's suppose it was vegetables. Let's suppose it was. That would be 3 pounds of steamed vegetables. Well, you're not going to eat 3 pounds of steamed vegetables. There's no way. Okay? Maybe you would, but I don't think so. And so when you start to realize that, you're like, wow, well, now wait a second. What's overeating again? I can't seem to reach the satiety until I seem to have overeaten. How about a pound of baked potatoes and then another pound and a half of steamed vegetables? That's 365 calories plus another 300. That's 665 calories. We've eaten 2.5 pounds of food. It's a phenomenal amount of food. I don't think you'll eat that much. And so I think that this question sometimes is coming from people that are very worried about weight loss and worried that they're overeating and that they think that they're not reaching satiety, that the reason why that they are having troubles with weight loss has to do with that they overeat and that they're eating past some satiety signal. This is an extremely common misunderstanding. Actually, I think somebody sent me some quotes from the Bright Line Eating lady, and she has this in her book that adults, have lost the ability to detect satiety. This is just complete pseudoscience, ridiculous nonsense. There's no truth in it at all. There's no evidence to suggest this in any way, shape, or form. So no, you don't need to weigh and measure your food. You don't need to worry about that you can't seem to hit satiety. You'll hit it. You'll hit it. You just keep eating until you hit it. Now that's how you do it. Now, under very unusual conditions where we have bizarre binge eaters that I do know of rare individuals that literally can eat 4 or 5 pounds of potatoes at a sitting. Okay, this is a different animal than what our normal question is. So if you guys think to yourself, are you one of those people? Can you take a 5-pound sack of potatoes out of the store and go home and cook up a 5-pound sack of potatoes and eat that at a sitting? If you can do that, call me. Okay, so that's a different problem than the normal question we have about satiety. The normal question we have about satiety is that the individual is probably struggling with their weight, not because that they don't reach satiety. They're struggling with their weight because their diet is too rich. And we have to look and see where that diet is too rich, not worry about their satiety signals. So trust your body. The satiety signals will tell you when to stop. That may mean that you're pretty darn full. But as long as you're pretty darn full on the right foods, you're not overeating.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Lisle. There's a couple of questions that I think I can combine because the general idea, I think, is the same. Okay. And it is someone's asking about how to deal with cravings like chocolate or salt. And someone says, what do I do when I get bouts of urgency to eat fatty foods, even though I haven't eaten that for 3 months? So basically, I mean, dealing with the urgency, I guess, people feel to eat either fat or sugar or chocolate. What do you say about that?
All right, let's just look at this. I mean, I'm extremely sympathetic to this.
Yeah, me too.
But let's look at what's happening here. So your nervous system is constructed in a way to optimize your survival and reproductive success. It has sub-programs to do this. So a sub-program that it does not have a sub-program that says, oh, if we eat really rich foods, we're going to gain weight and we're going to be less attractive. No, that's not an instinctual sub-program inside human beings or any other animal. Here is the sub-program. The sub-program is we need to eat. Sub-program is eat the richest food in the environment. That's the sub-program. So the circuit is always there, ready to go off. And so you sort of cycle, your mind cycles through behavioral options constantly. And so it's no surprise that once in a while, it's going to trip over the idea that a chocolate shake, a Snickers bar, a box of See's candy, a Cinnabon, or a hot dog is going to be a good idea. Okay? It has had those experiences, and therefore it's going to trip its way through there, and it's going to light up on one of them. And then the way the mind works is it has images. That's what we call your imagination. And those images, they're highly visual, so you see them in your mind's eye. And images of certain types have also additional senses that activate imaginary circuitry. So, for example, you can imagine what something would feel like. If I talk to you about sandpaper right now and rubbing your fingers on sandpaper, you'll think about that. Or for somebody like Gustavo, what it feels like to have different action on the keyboard of a different kind of piano. He can imagine it very well. And those are latent memory circuits that are sitting inside of that nervous system. Someone who's been to Tahiti will, as soon as I mention that word, it will activate memories, and you will reconstruct images of what you saw in Tahiti. And those images will not just be visual. They could also be auditory. You could be listening to the wind through the palm trees. You could be listening to the language that is being spoken there. And then you could also actually have gustatory and olfactory imagery about smelling some of the things that you smelled. So your imagination is reconstructions of past experiences that sit in memory. And because we've all been exposed to supernormal stimuli, it's all in there. It's all sitting inside your memory circuits waiting to go off. And it is and your motivational system is always circulating around looking for the ideal cost benefit value proposition for you. So as your mind is sort of scrolling around thinking, should I pull weeds in the garden, pet the cat, clean out the cat food dish or the cat litter box, talk to my mother, all the little things that it does. One of the things it does is maybe we could eat something. That might be a good idea. What do we have? Gee, what's in the refrigerator and everything? That's all just whole natural foods. Not that appealing. Let me see. Is there anything else in the world around food? Yes. Well, now that I think about it, there is. And now that I think about it, I can imagine and see and taste and smell what it would taste like to do that. And not only that, I know exactly where to get it. Okay? We're extremely good at remembering locations where supernormal stimuli was to be had. And so now we are tripping down a constructed memory lane, and you're motivated. And when you say, well, a craving, what that craving is that's that whole imaginary response that is associated with this, that is pulling you towards finding that stimulus. So your mind will eventually drift off of this thing in 20 minutes or half an hour, etc. In other words, it's a time-limited process, and you'll eventually get distracted. But what to do about those cravings, folks, you're going to have those forever. And they will come in less and less close intervals as you have those experiences less and less. But they're still going to be there, and there's no way to eradicate these from your experience. You just have to know that they're going to come. They're going to come in waves. It's kind of like crying. You know what I mean? You cry, and then pretty soon you're done crying. And that's it went through a neurological wave pattern, and that's exactly what happens with cravings. So you just have to tough it out.
Right. Okay, very good. Thank you. Have you ever heard people mention that since they have become plant-based and salt, oil, sugar-free, that their skin has become drier? Do you have any thoughts about that? Because someone is asking, and I've heard that question asked several times.
Wouldn't surprise me any. I think my skin is a little dry usually. If I sneak something naughty, it gets a little oilier. Mm-hmm. So that wouldn't surprise me that that's true. I don't know whether the drier skin is effectively healthier skin. Wouldn't surprise me if that's true. So these are not. It's really not a question for me. This is a Dr. McDougall type question.
Right.
And I don't worry about those kinds of variances. If something looks funny and my hair starts falling out or some other weird thing starts happening, I'd be questioning this. But and whether or not we should do something about that dryness, whether we should put things on it or if that would be a good thing, these are things that I don't know. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. It's fair. Okay. So perhaps just one more question. I know you have a busy day. Someone is asking, I have been eating plants, but my two teenage daughters and husband aren't interested in joining me. It makes it hard sometimes for me. I raised them eating, bad food. They don't want to jump on the vegan SOS free bandwagon. What do you suggest?
No worries. This is what you eat is an individual choice. And it's an individual choice that is going to be variable across your lifetime. So people will make different decisions at different times for different reasons. And so this individual sounds pretty committed. If she's carving out a very healthy, SOS free type lifestyle within a family situation where she has a child and a husband who are not on board, good for her. Of course, it's difficult, and I would expect it to be. It's a useful thing to try to reduce the tension in the system as much as possible by having zero expectations that they're going to join you. And don't even try to talk them into it. You've already said way too much. And so at this point, just ignore it. And also remember that sometimes people get the wrong idea about the urgency of people making changes. So they see people swallow a ham sandwich and they just feel like they're just clogging up their arteries and they're doing these terrible damage and they're going to die. This is not true. The average individual who's not smoking will live 80 years in this country. Now, will they eventually have serious cardiovascular complications? Yeah, but that's a lot of ham sandwiches, folks. That's decades and decades and decades. It almost never hits anybody before the age of 50 and rarely before the age of 60. So your daughter has plenty of time and your husband's got plenty of time because he can't be that old or you wouldn't have a daughter in the house. So everybody just relax. Take your time. The amazing thing is that even if people figure this out at 75, Caldwell Esselstyn has shown that they can pull you back from the Grim Reaper when you got all 3 feet on a banana peel next to the grave. So there's plenty of time.
Right.
Reduce your sense of urgency about this with others. Relax. They aren't doing that much damage. The damage is very slow. And so relax and set a good example. And little by little, the less pushy we are about it and the less moralistic or worried we are, the more likely they are to be willing to come our way a little bit at a time. And so if your daughter comes your way 10% over the next year, that's a lot. And then if she comes your way 10% another year, that's a lot. And if she comes your way 2% a year from there to her 30th birthday, that's a lot. So everybody be patient and just get along and don't worry about it.
Right. Dr. Lisle, can you just mention, I think that some people would like to know how a session with you goes, because I see a lot of questions here that really, personally, I think that they would benefit if they would just have a 30-minute or some session with you. Everybody, it's amazing what you can do with even just 30 minutes. Just, can you tell us a little bit about, when you do sessions over the phone or Skype, how long they are, or how does it go, so that it's not a mystery?
Right. People are kind of funny. They'll call me up and they'll say, I can't believe I'm talking to you. Yeah, I'm just a regular person. The same guy you see right now. And I'm in the same chair when I talk to you. And what we do is people ask me questions just like they ask me at a McDougall seminar or anything else. And they tell me a little bit more information because everybody's got individual circumstances. The husband's a little different than the other husband, and the daughter's a little different than the other daughter. And the woman has different worries than the other woman. And everybody's fighting a different part of this battle. And people's knowledge is different. Some people are extremely knowledgeable, but they're still struggling with something. And some people are confused about some real basic things. So I set aside 12 slots a week, Monday through Thursday, and it's $75 for a half an hour. And you can schedule right on my website. It's esteemdynamics.org. And these are times for people where we could just talk, and I ask you some questions to get some basic background information. I hear what the challenge is, what the frustration is that the person has. And then we work our way to the solution. And the good news about this is that probably whatever combination of struggles that person has, I've probably seen it more than 1,000 times. I have undoubtedly seen it more than 1,000 times. And so what seems very frustrating and sometimes, a person is stymied and really at a loss as to know what to do next. It's likely that I've got a trick or two that might be helpful. So no guarantees, but there's a good chance that there's something that will occur to me in your situation that we can target on and we can move forward. So that's what we do. And so most people will sign up for half an hour. Some people want a whole hour, which is $150, which is a lot of money. So, but those are slots that are available for people that are interested in this kind of problem or any other kind of psychological challenge. And that's available for people. And this is how it works. It's just like us having a conversation, and there's nothing weird or deep or psychodynamic. And I'm not going to likely ask you anything about your childhood, because that's probably not relevant to what we're doing.
Right. Well, thank you. I can testify from having had several sessions with you that it's amazing. So I want to encourage people to do that. We will look forward to seeing you next month on the second Tuesday. And thank you, everyone, for logging in. To send questions, please send them to webinar@drmcdougall.com, and then someone gets those questions and pass them on to me so I can ask them here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Lisle.
Great seeing you again, Gustavo. I'll see you real soon.
All right. Thank you, and goodbye, everyone.